Hi, we're here with Amelia Phillips from Highline Community College, and we're going to talk about why this is important. What are we doing here this weekend with this competition? Why are we holding it?
Okay, this is the third annual Pacific Rim Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, and the reason we're holding it is to get the students into how to defend a network. We teach them a lot of things, but they never really have to go up against anything. And this weekend we'll have actual real live hackers going against them, and they'll have to defend their networks against them.
Okay. So when students are participating in this, what is the importance of this competition in terms of tying the colleges together? So we have the University of Idaho, correct?
Actually, University of Idaho will not be here this year.
Okay, so who all is going to be here for the competition this year?
For the competition, we will have Highline Community College, Whatcom Community College, University of Washington Tacoma, University of Washington High School, DeVry, University of Washington, I believe they're computer science, and one other that I can't think of off the top of my head. But then Idaho State University will be here as our white team, as the judges, and then several other groups will be showing up for support.
Okay, so when you're competing in this kind of a collegiate environment, why is this an important thing for students to do? Why would they need to be here this weekend?
I think it really gets them into what it takes to walk into a situation and have to solve it. It's problem solving, it's cooperating, it's dealing with the unknown. Because during a competition, they're given so they basically have a company network that they're defending. And typically we just say, okay, everybody else, the entire IT staff got fired, and you're taking over this company, and you have to defend it. And, we want you to change passwords, we want an FTP because the owner is in Barbados, or whatever. And then after about an hour or two of them getting situational awareness, then the red team actually starts attacking them. This is based on the CDX exercises from the military academies, and those were very much geared towards national defense because, of course, the Pentagon's networks are attacked every day. This is more, we need to protect our infrastructure, we need to protect our schools, we need to protect our home networks. People are very concerned about identity theft. And even small companies. 80% of businesses in America are small companies. And therefore, any person who's an IT person needs to know how to defend a small network. Okay. And that's where this is going to come in handy.
Okay, so what is a CDX exercise? You mentioned that earlier.
These were the exercises that were started by the military academies. And I'm not remembering what the acronym stands for just off the top of my head. But back in about 1999, they came up with the idea that something had to happen because that was during the dot-com boom and the internet was just exploding, and they're like, we really need to start protecting this stuff. So in 2001, the military academies, so specifically West Point, and I forget the other two, I believe the Air Force.
Air Force in Colorado Springs and Annapolis in Maryland.
Annapolis, okay. So those came together and had the first competition. And they had 3 teams in that one. So they had a blue team, a red team, and I believe an orange team. And then that is now in its 9th or 10th year. In 2005, what had happened once the CDX exercises started, we colleges are like, well, we want to do it too. But they're like, well, you're not military, you don't have a clearance. Because the military academies, of course, can have the NSA, the National Security Administration, as their red team, which is really fun, but we don't qualify. So the University of Texas in San Antonio began the first collegiate cyber defense competitions in 2005. And so we feed into that.
So the national competition where the students will go from here, is that correct?
Yes. So we're considered a regional competition. So we are the Pacific Rim. So that's including Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and Hawaii. And unfortunately, Alaska and Hawaii will be doing it remotely this year in their own competition. Hopefully by next year, many of the other teams will be able to do it remotely who can't afford to physically be here. So there are, I believe, 7 or 8 regions nationally that will show up for nationals, I believe, April 18th in San Antonio.
So when the students actually get through this experience, what do you want the students to take away from this experience? What do you want them to go home with?
I want them to go home with, number one, teamwork. Okay, to defend their network, we've tried to give them that sense of, okay, yeah, this guy is good at routers, he needs a backup. Okay, this guy is good at writing reports, he needs a backup. And that they work well together. That it's not just the lone wolf sitting out there, it's my network and I'm the only one in it. It's, you have to act as a team in order to completely protect a network. You have to cooperate with each other. You have to communicate with each other. Of, hey, don't do that just now because I need to reset these before you continue. Just simple communication. I want them to take that away.
So if a team's not communicating, if they're all going off on their own lone wolf, which has really become kind of the dinosaur in information security, is the team doomed? Do they have a chance of winning this competition?
I don't think so. I mean, I won't say that it can't happen, but I think it'll be very difficult. I think it'll be very, very difficult if they're not cooperating with each other. So I want them to definitely come away with that sense of teamwork, because when you go and work for another company, unless you own the company, you don't control who you work with. And that's probably the most important thing for the real world.
What do you hope to see the students actually do over the weekend? What do you hope to see them accomplish beyond taking the teamwork and those good ideas home? What do you hope to see them have as a milestone or a marker in their life out of this experience?
Number one, I want them to have a good time.
Okay.
First and foremost,
Good time works.
so they need to have a good time. They need to relax. They need to see what really goes on. The hackers are real hackers. They are penetration testers. So that I want them to really experience what that's like to have your network being broken into. Because in a classroom setting, I can't give them that at this point in time. So I want them to walk away with that. I want them to see how they respond under pressure. Because I think personally that's what they're going to really have to take away, is that, can they actually think? Can they use all the stuff they've been studying the last 2 or 3 years when they're under pressure? So I think that it will be their personal growth.
Cool. So in an earlier interview, one of the people we talked to had said that students practice for a year to make it here. Is that a good idea to practice that much in terms of defending and attacking networks? Or is this something more?
Oh, definitely.
So the long practice is a good thing?
I think beyond just year-long practice, I think as a region we want to start doing just small little competitions where you have 1 or 2 schools going at each other, like say once a month or once a quarter. And then where you have 3 or 4 teams coming together for a cyber meet, just to practice. Because as much as we may teach people how to do Active Directory, do you really know how to plug all the holes on it? Do you really understand how to lock down a router? Do you understand scripting for a router? That is not something you learn overnight. So yes, practice, practice, practice.
So the idea then is that with the colleges, is because colleges traditionally teach theory, but they don't get into practice until they actually hit the first organization they go work at. What you're proposing is to take theory and practice in a very collegiate environment among colleges and turn it into simple competitions over specific items.
Okay, let's back up just a minute. Is universities tend to stick with the theory. Okay, community colleges and technical colleges do the hands-on.
Okay.
And so and we're limited by budget, even for the amount of hands-on that we can give them. So if we can at least teach them, how to set up a router, how to operate one, that's great. And how to install a full network, get a running network, that's typically the most we can really teach them. To actually teach them anything beyond that is very, very difficult. So yes, these competitions give them more of a real-world environment scenario.
And then they take these real-world environments off these competitions and they take them to the places that they work, and then they can apply these lessons immediately.
Yes, yes. Especially in light of the whole thing that in an article back in February, which stated based on a White House scenario that was run, that the U.S. and most countries would not survive a cyber war because most IT professionals are ill prepared for it. They have no concept of it.
So is this something that at our level, do you think the government should fund these kind of competitions or make the money available to hold these competitions?
Either the government or private industry, because I think the money needs to come from private industry or from organizations, professional organizations, because, I mean, getting into government funding sort of is a touchy subject, but I think private organizations, if you contribute to training people, they are going to be producing quality employees that they're going to want to hire. And so, yes, I think the money needs to go into this. Even, I mean, we've had traditionally the computer scientists, which that's never going to go away because we need people designing the operating systems and whatever. But now, because of cell phones, PDAs, I mean, my cell phone does more than my computer did 20 years ago.
Yes.
And those things can be broken into. They can be used. Now, you can turn off your lights in your house remotely.
Or just like that angry young gentleman in Texas this week that set off and locked up 100 cars remotely over the internet because he got fired.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, that one I missed. I missed that article. Yes, because of these things, we need to train people of how to properly do these things. So I think, the funding needs to happen and more attention needs to be given to recruiting, this is my own personal pitch, getting more women and minorities into the IT fields.
So on that personal pitch, what do you think the major holdups are? Why don't women and minorities go into IT? Why is it still a very white male-oriented industry?
I think it's a two-pronged issue. Number one is, I think, culturally, they keep being told, oh, you can't do math.
Okay.
That's sort of the thing that's out there. And math and computers have always been lumped together. If you can't do math, you can't do computers. That whole paradigm is changing. For a network administrator, you probably need a little bit of pre-calculus. You don't need to be doing the high-level calculus to be a network administrator, to be a really good network administrator. So that math piece needs to be unplugged. And then the second thing is to change the whole culture of IT, the lone wolf that we were talking about earlier, and more of the group dynamics. Women and most ethnic minorities in America like socializing, like group work. And if you show that IT work, networking, the word network means multiple. It implies that you've got a whole group going on there, that this is teamwork, that you can actually have fun and a collectivism. I think it would attract more women and minorities to the field.
Do you think that organizations like Girls in Tech, Women in Tech, help bring more women and minorities into the field, or do we need to have a specific organization that's geared towards women and minorities to come into IT?
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above. I think there has to be, I've had this conversation with a few people, there needs to be more outreach. We have got to hit them somewhere between 6th and 8th grade is where they just go off on a tangent, where these very, very intelligent women and minorities, and all of a sudden they hit that 8th grade and something happens. And where, you've got all of these really smart geeks over here, and they're not part of that clique. And then as a result, they get turned off to it, and they go and do something else. And so we need to catch them then. The outreach needs to happen at about somewhere around 8th or 9th grade.
So this is really more something that in the elementary school we need to get them more engaged in terms of not just operating a computer, but understanding how it works.
How it works, how it affects your life, what you can actually do. Because so many people do not realize the job opportunities that are out there. Because unfortunately their guidance counselors, their teachers don't know. And that's the other thing, is training faculty and instructors. That's a biggie.
Big challenge, I think, to make this happen.
It's not something that's going to happen overnight, no.
But from what I'm also seeing in the IT culture, as practiced in large corporations, we're seeing a lot more demographic, more ethnic groups inside of large organizations like a Sony and a Microsoft.
Right.
And do you think that those lessons get pulled out and actually applied to the children of these IT workers that are busy in the industry now?
I think yes. I think yes. It's similar to almost what happened when women were breaking into the engineering field.
Mhm.
Just culturally, say 40 years ago, a woman engineer dressed the way the men did,
Mhm.
in pantsuits and whatever. And now they have gone back to being very feminine. And I think the same thing can be sort of, that step can be skipped here.
Mhm.
Because we know that it doesn't need to happen. That they can bring their culture, their way of doing things into IT and really influence that now, if that's addressing your question.
So when we see the event over Saturday and Sunday, how many women and minorities will be represented on the teams?
Oh boy. Well, our representative from Whatcom did tell me that she has 2 Latino women who will
Mhm.
be on her team. I have 1 woman on my team, unfortunately, just 1, out of 3 that were in the class. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely, I'm feeling guilty that I have not recruited more women into my program. And I don't know from the other colleges and universities how many will be there, but we shall see, and we'll just see how, if they operate differently, because we do have a research team that's here, and maybe we need to put a bug in their ear that they need to look at that.
Okay. So if you had one final piece of advice that you would give to people attending this event, what would it be
For the observers or the students?
for the students?
Have a good time.
Have a good time. Thank you, Amelia. It was very nice to have you
Thank
do
you,
this
Dan.
interview.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, we digressed by one to make sure